Hello and welcome to Native Yoga Center. My name is Todd McLaughlin. Today I want to show you some tips and tricks on how to practice a pose called Pindasana, Embryo Pose. Embryo Pose is a deep forward rounding shoulder standing position that incorporates several difficult challenging ingredients such as the lotus pose, a plow pose, and then a deep forward bend. And then it also involves later on in the game a wrap around the lotus while we're holding in the shoulder stand. So yes, it is complex. However, it is possible to practice this pose very easily. Now, if we investigate some of the key ingredients of the Pindasana embryo pose, it basically, from a beginner's perspective, it is sitting cross legs and rounding your body forward. So one way that you can approach this pose is to just take the key ingredients, which are spinal flexion, some form of cross leg position, be it Sukhasana or Ardha Padmasana, half lotus, or full lotus, right foot, left foot, Padmasana. So one of those three options with a rounding position. And it can be done while you're rounded on your seated bend. It can be done while you're rounding, bouncing on your hips. It's a different pose at that point. It changes the name of it, but it can be used. Or there's the version where we're in the lotus and we bring the lotus down toward the chest, eventually taking the arms and wrapping around and bouncing and catching. So it is a fairly dynamic pose. However, my goal in this tutorial is to show you a couple different ways that you can approach it where A, you don't hurt your knees, B, you don't hurt your neck, and C, you can still breathe. That's very important. So you saw how I already mentioned that you can come into the cross-leg position and you can practice Pindasana by rounding here. And this is going to be a really good option for those of you, for you, if you have a neck issue. So if putting pressure on your neck, how do I know if I have a neck issue? One way that we find out is that when we start going into shoulder stand poses, the key when you shoulder stand is to keep your chin tucked in and to not turn your head to one side or the other while you're in deep flexion. So right now I can turn my head because there's no pressure on my shoulders, but when I come up into a shoulder stand or plow position, I'm not going to move my head. I'm going to keep my head completely relaxed, my neck relaxed. And then Pindasana, another way we can approach it is to cross the legs and just bring the knees down toward the cheeks or the face or down toward the shoulders. So to answer my first question that I posed to you, or if your question is, how do I know if my neck is not feeling good for that? You try it and you realize, wow, that's too much pressure. In which case, I would suggest another way you can practice the embryo pose is simply lay on your back, cross your legs, grab your feet, and just try to lift your head so that you're here in this position. And this way you can imitate the embryo shape. So you're pretty much in exactly the same position as the embryo pose if you're on your shoulders, but you do it here. And that way you can just work on strengthening the neck by lifting your head as opposed to putting pressure on the shoulders with your body on your neck. So that's key. Once we figure that out, the next main piece that we have to put into the equation or puzzle is the lotus. So the lotus pose is where we take right foot first, bring your right foot on your left thigh, and the left foot second, bring the left foot up on top. And so we get this classic, like we heard when we were in kindergarten, crisscross applesauce. Basically, you have your legs in what's called Padmasana. So because of the amount of pressure that this can put on the knees, if your hips are not flexible enough, it's possible that you can overdo it and really feel it on the knees. Or another classic thing that happens as we start to go into Padmasana and it's a really loose Padmasana. And a big pain point for folks can be the ankle. Having that much pressure on the ankle when the foot's being pressed like this can be really painful. The other element too is that the ankle bone pushing down against the shin bone, also not so comfortable. Padmasana, in my opinion, is only really fun when we're able to get the feet far enough up onto the thigh that the ankle bones are not pushing into the shin bones. So this is a very advanced movement that takes a lot of time and practice. So we got to now discover, what can I do? So the different ways we can combine these is, if my lotus is comfortable, but my neck is out and I don't want to put pressure on my neck, I usually practice Pindasana a little more like this, where I have the lotus. I take my arms, I hook them under the knees, and I can fold down and kind of imitate the Pindasana shape without putting too much pressure on my neck. If it's my neck feels good, but my knees do not, then the way that we can practice the Pindasana is by coming up onto the shoulders, taking a classic cross-leg position, because this is pretty gentle on the knees, and then folding down. And this way, neck feels great, knees feel great, no problems. So there's the way that I want you to start thinking in terms of your posture modification is, if you break it into what is each part of the body doing in the pose, figuring out what part am I able to practice in a healthy, safe fashion, and then you then piece it back together. This is a reasonable way to still stay or to be engaged in a very difficult series of asana and still take really good care of the body. There's no competition. And there's no outside source that is determining what is best for you. We give you tips, tricks, and ideas on how to do, but ultimately it's got to come from within, and you got to practice. It's through the practice that we discover this and we figure it out. All right, so a couple more tips and tricks if you're going into the cross-leg position, or the lotus position, sorry. So I covered this information in the tutorial that I did for the previous pose, which requires the same setup, the Urdhva Padmasana, the upward lotus. But here, what we'll do is, once we're able to establish the shoulder stand position, the way that we're able to enter into the lotus, and if we've already determined that lotus is an option, what we do is we take the right leg and we bring the right leg into the lotus. And the way that you bring the leg down a little further, because if I try to cross this foot in lotus, I'm nowhere near close enough. So what I got to do is lean a little bit of weight on my right arm so I can take my left hand and go up and pull the foot down. And now what I could do is just hold in a half lotus like this and drop my leg down in the half lotus. Now you can also reverse this, where you do the half lotus and you fold down, kind of like a thread the needle pose. And if we were holding for an 8-breath pattern, you can do both sides, one side for 4 breaths and the other side for 4 breaths. So this is a good way to kind of work your hip flexibility while in the shoulder stand. Is just to take one leg down in the half lotus position. Now, granted, this is relatively challenging. If you're brand spanking new to yoga, I don't suspect this is going to be fun for you. So the main thing I want you to do in the beginning is practice this kind of balled up position, where you just lay on your back, you take your legs, you cross your legs one over the other, and you just pull your head up a little bit and you squeeze right here. This in essence is the embryo pose. What's kind of fun about this is, like the embryo, we're thinking of the idea of when we were in utero, we were twisting and turning and moving around in the uterus. So we're basically kind of imitating that, so to speak, as a mature human being. I'm going out on a limb and calling myself a mature human being. I know you probably feel the same about you. All right, so but you get the idea, is that we're basically imitating this embryo shape. And we have this shape throughout the primary series in multiple positions, sitting in lotus, on our shoulders in lotus, and also in the Garbha Pindasana, where we slide the arms through and we do these different lotus variations. All right, I hope this information helps. If you're new to Ashtanga Yoga, I have a brand new course out that's free. I have a limited amount. I'm giving it away. And it is called 8 and 8. Learn the 8-limb yoga in 8 days. Ashtanga means 8 limbs. So 8-limb yoga. And I teach you the beginning sun salutations and standing poses and final breathing. So you have a complete practice over an 8-day period, slowly stacking more information day by day. So that by the end of the 8 days, you already have you'll have the fundamentals of Ashtanga yoga in place. This way you have a short, condensed practice that you then can always add more, but on a day where you have very little time and or maybe physically you're feeling challenged, there's a way that you can do a short practice, bring some yoga in on a daily basis, and this way you can really progress and have a long-term practice. As in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, Patanjali mentions that success in yoga is consistency over a long period of time. And in this course, I also do very short philosophy videos that explain the 8 limbs, such as the yamas, niyamas, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. If that's foreign language to you, that's why I think you'll enjoy this course. So check it out. It's free. All right. On that note, have a great day. Namaste.